first thing that we want to talk about is caregiving. Caregiving, and there's upwards of some 44 million people that are involved in caregiving in a home setting with maybe a family member or even a friend, some kind of an arrangement between people to care for those in homes. So it affects a lot of people. And my guests today are Karen Hayes, and Karen is you're the executive director of, I want to get this right, Karen, so why don't you tell folks what it is?
Of CADLIC Neurological Resource Center.
And the Resource Center offers a lot of support in our community, and we'll have an opportunity to learn some very big specifics about that. We also have Bob DiLorenzo, and Bob is a member of the board of directors of the Neurological Resource Center, and he was also a caregiver himself for at least 10 years. Is that right, Bob?
That's correct, Christine. Yeah. My wife Nancy had Alzheimer's disease, and I ended up, as her husband, being her caregiver for the better part of 10 years.
10 years. When she died, Bob, was she at home?
No, I kept her. We actually moved from Richland to Kennewick to the village at Canyon Lakes so that I could keep her at home for a couple of more years, and that's the way it worked out. She was actually diagnosed in January of 2001, and she passed away in June of 2011, so it was a little bit more than 10 years actually. But as it turns out, the first few years, the caregiving requirements are not as great because she may have some memory problems, but her executive function activities aren't diminished yet, so she's able to take care of herself. But by moving to Kennewick, we were able to bring someone into the home to help her do the things of daily living. And then eventually, about 2 years before she passed away, I placed her at one of the Alzheimer's special care facilities in the Tri-Cities.
Karen, so that number is pretty fluid. You're telling me 44 million. There's no way to tell what the number is there?
Well, I think caregiving is underreported. People often don't recognize themselves as caregivers. They think, I'm caring for my husband, I'm caring for my spouse, my mother, and don't recognize themselves as such. And when you Google caregiving statistics, they're often from 2008, 2009, so we know there are a greater number now.
What are the various relationships that people have that they get into these caregiving situations?
You could be a sister. I do a caregiver support group every third Tuesday at Catholic Healthplex, and in that group alone, there are sibling relationships, mother-daughter relationships, spousal relationships. People come in support of friends even.
And also I'm thinking severely disabled children being cared for by their parents in the home these days.
Absolutely.
And why do people do it? I know obviously love is number one, so people do it for love. But don't people also do it for money? For the lack of money to be able to place someone somewhere else?
How about if I answer that one?
Okay,
Christine?
go ahead. You're going to talk about love. I know you are.
Of course.
Good.
She and I have been married, in fact, it would have been 50 years last Friday if she had survived. But I knew her best, I loved her most, and I just felt that I was the one that could take care of her best. And I think you see that in a lot of cases, whether it's siblings involved as caregivers, or whether it's someone taking care of a parent, mother or father. It is primarily love. But at the same time, the people who are being cared for don't want to leave their homes either. They're most comfortable at home. And so it's the toughest decision I ever had to make was to place Nancy in an institution. I placed her at Callaway Gardens, and it was the hardest decision I ever had to make. And in fact, I did what most people do. I waited probably longer than I should have before I placed her, because I didn't want to take that step because it was such a hard decision to make.
What do you think, Bob, was the most difficult thing about being a caregiver in the later years? I'm talking about, she probably did not know you, or did she?
She knew my voice. Whether she knew exactly who I was or not wasn't really clear. But The hardest thing was just to see the deterioration. And in the case of Alzheimer's, it is sort of a one-way street. There is no hope for, the best you can do is to prolong the disease process and provide some quality of life to the person. But it's going to end up in death.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas people who are caring for autistic children, for example, there are positives there because the school systems are really good in special education. We have a conference that we put on that provides a lot of assistance in the way of knowledge in particular to how to best care for your autistic child.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with other diseases. There were 25 or 30 different neurological disorders that we deal with at KNRC, Catholic Neurological Resource Center. And not all of them end up as dementia or
Mm-hmm.
in particular Alzheimer's do. So there are some positive aspects, and you can see progress, and of course that's rewarding.
It would be, yes. So, were you lonely?
Very, very much so. Although placing her, I ended up moving from the status of caregiver, which I never thought of myself as a caregiver really. I was her husband. It was the thing that you do as a husband, is take care of your wife. She would have taken care of me, and it was just, turnabout is fair play. But once I placed her, I was able to go back to being her husband again, because I didn't have to worry about the day-to-day helping her to dress or helping her to shower or feeding her, those sorts of things. They were taken care of by Callaway Gardens. And so I could go back to doing the things that I wanted to do for her as a husband. We laughed a lot. I used to prepare myself with jokes that I would tell her, and we would laugh. I don't have a voice, but I would sing to her,
Mm-hmm.
and she knew my voice, and my voice was comforting for her. She was in a wheelchair at the end, and I would push her through the halls of Callaway Gardens, singing to her and talking to her and reflecting on all the memories we had from our, at that time, 46 years of marriage. So, it was just trying to give her the quality of life. There's a book that I've read that's called Creating Moments of Joy. And the best you can really do in a situation like that, and once again, I'm most familiar with dementia and Alzheimer's in particular, but the idea of creating moments of joy certainly add to the life, the fullness of life that
Mm-hmm.
someone who's afflicted like that could have. And I took a lot of satisfaction out of seeing her smile, as I told a joke and she got it and laughed at it. Music is one of the things that lasts long in dementia patients. And so I would sing songs that we were familiar with, and I could see her either tapping her finger or, moving her head and that sort of thing. But she was understanding the music, and seeing her joyful made me joyful as well,
Mhm.
despite
Mhm.
the circumstances.
Yes. We're going to take a break here because we're already a quarter after the hour. We have a lot more to discuss. I want to share with you, or allow Karen to share with you, the important services that the Neurological Center provides for caregivers. I mean, this is a real connection to the community. Stay with us. We're back in a moment. This is Meet in the Middle. I'm Christine Brown. We are talking about caregiving and the Tri-Cities. And my guests today are Karen Hayes. She's the Executive Director of the Neurological Resource Center. And also Robert DiLorenzo. And Robert is a board member of the Resource Center. And he was himself a caregiver for some 10 years with his wife. And what is the most common condition, Karen, that people are providing care and home for?
Dementia and Alzheimer's. We see a lot of caregivers who are providing for people with both of those conditions.
Mm-hmm. And then beyond that, what are some others?
Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis. We see a lot of parents of those on the autism spectrum.
Mm-hmm. And what do people, when you actually are able to make contact, because as you were saying before, a lot of people are, in-home providing this care to their family member, and they don't even know that there are resources out there for them to make connections. But what do they say they need the most?
The thing that's really helpful about the way the Neurological Resource Center is set up is that people can walk into the library and they come in and they tell us their story. And so once we find out what their particular situation is, we can connect them with the appropriate resources in the community and also give them the education via library materials and educational programs, as well as really encourage them to attend the variety of support groups that we have. Because I think it's critical for people to understand the disease process of the person that they're caring for, so that they most effectively understand the behaviors that that person is engaging in.
Mm-hmm. I want to remind you of our phone number if you want to call and join our conversation, add a comment, ask a question, 547-8726. So I want to talk I want to talk specifically about support groups, because they just seem like they are so vital and important to this situation. You can hear from a doctor about what the stages are going to be of some type of a debilitating disease, but it just seems like it's more powerful and meaningful to you if you can talk with other people who have been there and experienced it themselves.
That's very true. The beauty, I think, of the support group is that people really do come together and they share their stories and their circumstances, and they learn from each other. And most of the time, everyone leaves the room in a better place than they were when they came in,
Mm-hmm.
because they do feel some camaraderie and some hope and, answers that can help them make their days easier, and the person that they're caring for to make that day easier as well. So there's so much value in the support groups.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I think is important too, Christine, is the idea of people understanding that I'm not in this alone, and I'm not the only one that's experiencing what I'm going through as a caregiver. Getting ideas from other people who have, and in my case I lead 2 support groups for dementia caregivers, and hearing from other people who have experienced in the past what you're going through now gives you some idea of whether or not you're doing the right things.
Mm-hmm.
And you also get feedback. I try to provide feedback to the people in my groups that, hey, they're heroes in what they're doing, because for love, they're really taking care of their loved one in a very difficult situation. And when you have a group, we had a support group meeting last evening, and there were 10 of us. 2 of us had already lost our loved one, but one of the ladies keep coming back because she has information that she would like to pass on to others.
Mm.
And quite frankly, from my perspective, it helps the grieving process as well. But for the people in the support group to ask a question and then to have someone answer, and I don't provide answers, I try to facilitate, but when I have an answer, I will provide it. But to have someone say, well, gee, my mother was doing that just 2 weeks ago, and here's what I did. Just as an example, we have one thing we call therapeutic lying. We're taught as children
Mm-hmm.
not to tell a lie.
Yes.
And yet, when you're dealing with someone who's demented, if the person thinks, well, today is Wednesday, of course, but oh no, it isn't, it's Thursday. You're right, I was mistaken. And therapeutic lying comes into play there because you don't want to do any harm. And the agitation or the anger that can be provoked by that is really disheartening.
Mm-hmm.
And what you want to do is no harm. And I don't even take credit for developing that concept of therapeutic lying. One of the caregivers actually came in and said, here's what I do, and it's stuck.
Oh, that does sound very, very useful, because yes, there's nothing to be gained by being right
Mhm.
in that setting. Absolutely nothing. I'm gonna think that burnout is a pretty big problem for people that are involved in caregiving, because it is basically 24/7, isn't it? The person is in the home with you. It's 24/7.
Yes, it is. And it is not unusual for the caregiver to predecease the person they're caring for.
Oh.
And so one of the
Oh.
things that we try to emphasize in our support groups I lead, I'm sure Karen does the same thing, is don't forget to take care of yourself as well, because the stress is unbelievable. And the idea of, what's happening, don't take it more than a day at a time. Don't look too far down the road, because some of the things that you encounter, you would just as soon not pre-encounter them. You would just as soon wait until you get there and then come to a support group and ask for some help, rather than troubling yourself with something that may or may not occur.
Mm-hmm. Well, for people who are not in the situation of being a caregiver, but they see people that are, what is the best thing that friends can do? How can they help in that situation?
We typically say, if you need any help, call me.
Yes, we say that.
Yep, but quite frankly, it's tough for a caregiver to formulate what can I ask that person to do for me. So rather than saying, if you need help, call me, assume they do need help. And if you just suggest to them, how about if I bring over a meal Thursday night? And just cook for them, bring the meal over so that the caregiver doesn't have to worry about preparing a meal in addition to caregiving. Or how about if I come over on Wednesday afternoon and spend a couple of hours so you can get out to the hairdresser, or so you can go out and do some grocery shopping or that sort of thing. If you mention something specific, then it's more likely that the caregiver, who is probably overstressed anyhow, will say, boy, thank you very much. How about next Wednesday, or how about next Thursday? Rather than thinking, all right, I'll give her a call when I really need it, or I'll give him a call when I really need help, and you never do.
Wow, that is really, really good advice. I hadn't thought about it, but you've been in the chair, so you understand that. Be specific. That sounds like a lot better situation. So tell me more about the what resources are at the Resource Center, and first of all, where are you located?
We are located at 1268 Lee Boulevard in Richland in the new Catholic Healthplex building. So if you enter that building and go to the right, you'll see the library, and that's where the Neurological Resource Center staff members are.
What kinds of support groups do you provide? I mean, what are are there titles? How are they categorized?
Yes, we have a variety. As Bob said, we have caregivers groups for those people with Alzheimer's. We have a general caregivers group that's done once a month. We have Parkinson's support groups, MS, post-polio. We have an art expressions group, which is for anyone that is caring for someone with a neurological disorder or has one, which is a very nice creative outlet. We also have a spinal disorder support group, ALS, and chronic pain.
Wow, okay, you're covering a lot of ground there.
We are.
Yeah, so that's a great resource here in the Tri-Cities. How about a phone number? I always like those.
943-8455.
Okay. The situation of caring for somebody seems like it would be very, very isolating. I mean, you're not going to work anymore per se. You're not taking off and visiting folks. I mean, you have to be in the home typically to care for people. How do you ever stay? How do you stay connected with the other people?
That's one of the hardest things, and that's why the support groups are so really filling the bill for that kind of connection. Typically, people who are caring for others are so tied up with what they're doing that they don't get much chance to get out. One of the things that we've done, I have a little card that I pass out in the support group that it's a little, almost like a business card size thing, but on the back it says, please excuse my partner who has dementia. And if you go to a restaurant, just the two of you, if you just hand that to the hostess or your table server, they understand that if there is some bizarre behavior, there's a reason for it. In general, they're pretty compassionate about the whole thing. But that's more of an encouragement to get out.
Mm-hmm.
If friends know that someone is in a caregiving position where they are becoming isolated, then offering to come over and just tend to the person they're caring for a while, it does give the caregiver a chance to get out, which is another reason why that kind of an offer is always acceptable and usually accepted.
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea. I love the calling card, basically. Yeah. You're full of good ideas, Bob.
He is.
Wow.
He
Yeah. More people need to go and hear them and take advantage of them. So you have been, you live that system of caring for somebody. And Karen, you learn about it from a lot of people. What are things that our society could do, changing laws or whatever, that could offer more support to the people that are staying home and taking care of folks? What could we do as a society that we're not doing now? What could we do better?
I think one of the basic things that people could do is stay connected to the person that has Alzheimer's, dementia, or a neurological disorder. I think that we, by our instinct, just stop and disconnect, but that person is still there. And so if you have a friend that you've played cards with and that person has a diagnosis of dementia, continue to do that. Obviously, you're not going to play by the rules anymore, but continue to meet with that person. And spend time, and that will ultimately help the caregiver, because the caregiver can be doing something else that they need to do. You know, whether it's a 10-minute phone conversation or doing laundry without worrying about the person they're caring for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think if we change just that one thing, it could have an enormous impact.
Stay connected, okay?
Stay connected is a good idea. One of the, just giving the person an opportunity to get out. Most friends, though, knowing of a situation like that, feel very awkward. What do I say?
Mm-hmm.
And that's another good reason for even a friend of a caregiver to come to our library to get an idea of what kinds of things can you do to help a person who is a caregiver for a dementia patient. And that way there are all kinds of ideas of things that you can do to help them not be so isolated. And you don't have to be caring for someone with a neuro disorder to use our library. It's open to anybody. And we do have a lot of resources. First of all, you can get a better understanding of what they're going through.